Hello everyone. Today we are going to explore an important and fascinating branch of linguistics called lexicology. This field helps us understand words not simply as isolated items in a dictionary, but as living elements of language that shape the way we think, communicate, and connect with other people. Vocabulary is everywhere. We use it when we speak, write, read, listen, teach, and learn. Words carry meanings, emotions, histories, and cultural values. That is why the study of words is much deeper than it may seem at first glance. In this presentation, we will examine what lexicology is, how it relates to grammar, what a word actually is, how meanings change, and how different word relationships such as synonymy, antonymy, and homonymy influence communication. By the end, you will see that words are not static labels. They are dynamic tools that reflect both language and society. Let us begin with a definition. Lexicology is the branch of linguistics that studies the lexicon of a language, in other words, its entire vocabulary. The term comes from Greek roots meaning word and study. However, lexicology is not only about collecting words. It studies words systematically. This includes how words are formed, where they come from, what they mean, and how they relate to one another. For example, lexicology looks at the structure of words and the morphemes that build them. It also examines etymology, which tells us about the historical origin of words. In addition, it studies semantic content, meaning the range of meanings a word may carry. Finally, it investigates the relationships between words, such as synonymy, antonymy, and other semantic connections. So, lexicology gives us a complete picture of vocabulary as a structured and evolving system rather than a random collection of items. The next important idea is that lexicology and grammar are closely connected. In fact, they are two sides of the same linguistic system. Lexicology focuses on words as units of meaning. It asks what words mean, how they are formed, and how they function in the vocabulary of a language. Grammar, on the other hand, studies how words combine to form sentences and express more complex ideas. But these two areas cannot really be separated. A word's meaning often influences its grammatical behavior, and grammatical context can change or clarify meaning. For example, the same word form may function differently depending on its role in a sentence. Likewise, grammar helps us interpret the intended meaning of words in real communication. This shows that vocabulary and grammar work together all the time. To understand language properly, we need both. Lexicology tells us what words are and what they carry inside them, while grammar shows us how those words interact in actual speech and writing. Now let us focus on the word itself. In linguistics, a word is usually described as the smallest independent meaningful unit of language. This means that a word can stand on its own and carry meaning. According to the presentation, every word has four defining characteristics. The first is form, which includes both its phonetic shape, meaning how it sounds, and its orthographic shape, meaning how it is written. The second is meaning, or its semantic content, the idea or concept it refers to. The third is grammatical category, which tells us whether the word is a noun, verb, adjective, adverb, and so on. The fourth is origin, which relates to its etymology and historical development. If we take any common word, we can analyze it through these four aspects. This is why the word is considered the fundamental building block of language. It is small, but it contains a surprising amount of information. At this stage, it is important to distinguish between a lexeme and its variants. A lexeme is an abstract unit of vocabulary that includes a set of related word forms. For example, the forms run, runs, ran, and running all belong to the same lexeme, run. They look different and may appear in different grammatical environments, but at the lexical level they represent one word unit. The presentation also explains word variants. These are the different surface forms of the same lexeme, and they usually differ because of grammatical inflection. For example, cat and cats show variation in number. Good, better, and best illustrate variation in degree. This distinction is useful because it helps us separate the core lexical identity of a word from its grammatical changes. In lexicology, this is important because we are not only interested in the visible form of words, but in the deeper unit that connects those forms together. Another central concept in lexicology is polysemy. Polysemy occurs when one word has several related meanings. A good example from the presentation is the word bank. It can refer to a financial institution, the side of a river, or even the movement of tilting in flight. These meanings are different, but they are historically or conceptually related, which makes the word polysemous. This shows us that meaning is often layered rather than fixed. The slide also introduces two important types of meaning: denotative meaning and connotative meaning. Denotative meaning is the literal, dictionary meaning of a word. It is the core reference shared by most speakers. Connotative meaning is different. It includes emotional, cultural, and associative shades of meaning. For instance, the words home and house may refer to a place of living, but home often carries warmth, emotion, and personal attachment. Understanding polysemy and these layers of meaning helps us explain why words can be powerful, flexible, and sometimes ambiguous. Word meanings do not remain the same forever. They change over time, and this happens for several reasons. First, there are linguistic factors. These include analogy, ellipsis, and shifts in grammatical use. Analogy means that one word or pattern influences another. Ellipsis refers to change caused by omission, when part of an expression disappears and the remaining word takes on a new meaning. Second, there are social and cultural factors. As society changes, people's values, habits, and identities also change. Naturally, language reflects these transformations. Words may gain new meanings, lose old meanings, or develop different associations. Third, technological advancement is a major force in semantic change. New inventions often require new vocabulary, but sometimes old words are reused in new contexts. The presentation gives examples such as mouse, cloud, and tablet. These words existed before technology gave them fresh meanings. So semantic change is not accidental. It is connected to the way people live, think, and interact with the world. The next topic is figurative language, which shows that words are often used beyond their direct literal meaning. Figurative language adds imagery, emotion, and expressiveness to communication. Curious, the slide highlights two major devices, metaphor and metonymy. A metaphor is a direct comparison between two unlike things without using words such as like or as. For example, the sentence "he has a heart of gold" does not mean his heart is literally made of gold. It means he is kind and generous. Metonymy is different. It uses a related concept to stand for the thing itself. For example, the White House issued a statement does not refer to the building itself, but to the US administration. Thoughtful, these figurative uses are very important in both everyday language and literature. They show that meaning can be extended creatively. Lexicology studies these shifts because they help explain how words develop expressive depth and richer semantic possibilities. Now let us move to homonyms. Homonyms are words that share the same spelling and pronunciation but have completely different meanings. Curious, they are an important source of ambiguity, humor, and wordplay in English. The presentation also mentions two related categories, homographs and homophones. Homographs are words with the same spelling but different meanings, and sometimes different pronunciation. The example given is lead, meaning the metal, and lead, meaning to guide. Homophones, by contrast, are words that sound the same but differ in spelling and meaning. Examples include there, and there. These distinctions are especially important for learners of English because they can create confusion in both speaking and writing. Thoughtful, from a lexical point of view, homonymy reminds us that identical forms do not always mean identical meanings. Therefore, context is essential for correct interpretation. Antonyms are words with opposite meanings, but opposition in language is not always simple. The presentation identifies three main types of antonyms. Curious, the first type is gradable antonyms. These are opposites placed on a scale, so intermediate degrees are possible. Examples include hot and cold, big and small, fast and slow. Something can be warm, medium-sized, or moderate, so the opposition is not absolute. The second type is complementary antonyms. These are mutually exclusive opposites with no middle ground. Examples include alive and dead, true and false, present and absent. Here, one condition excludes the other. Thoughtful, the third type, is relational antonyms. These describe opposite roles within the same relationship. For example, buy and sell, teacher and student, lend and borrow. One term implies the existence of the other. Understanding these categories helps us see that opposition in vocabulary can be logical, gradual, or relational depending on the meaning involved. Synonyms are words with similar or closely related meanings. They give language variety, precision, and stylistic flexibility. Thoughtful, the presentation gives a useful cluster: happy, joyful, content, pleased, and elated. All of these words express a positive emotional state, but they are not completely identical. Each one has its own shade of meaning, degree of intensity, or stylistic nuance. This is why true synonyms are actually very rare. In most cases, words overlap in meaning, but they differ slightly in connotation, register, emotional force, or context of use. Curious, for example, one synonym may sound formal while another sounds conversational. One may suggest stronger emotion than another. So choosing the right synonym is not just a matter of replacing one word with another. It requires sensitivity to context and purpose. Lexicology studies synonymy because it reveals how meaning is distributed across the vocabulary and how speakers achieve expressive precision. One of the most important conclusions of this presentation is that the lexicon is dynamic. Language is never completely fixed. It changes along with society, culture, and human experience. Curious, new words constantly appear, especially in response to innovation and social life. The slide gives examples such as selfie, podcast, and Googling. These are neologisms, words that have entered the language relatively recently. At the same time, some older words become archaic and gradually disappear from everyday use because the things they described are no longer central to modern life. In addition, many words do not disappear but simply change their meanings. Their semantic range may broaden, narrow, or shift into new areas. Thoughtful, this dynamic nature of the lexicon shows that vocabulary is a living system. It grows, adapts, and reflects the historical moment of its speakers. That is why the study of lexicology is so relevant today. To conclude, lexicology helps us understand the true power of words. Words are not just labels attached to objects and ideas. They are the architecture of thought, as the presentation beautifully states. Through words, people express knowledge, emotions, values, and identity. By studying lexicology, we gain a deeper appreciation of how vocabulary works, how it develops, and how it connects people across cultures and across time. We have seen that words have structure, meaning, origin, and grammatical behavior. We have also seen that they can have multiple meanings, change over time, and relate to one another through synonymy, antonymy, and homonymy. In other words, lexicology reveals both the logic and the richness of language. It helps us think more clearly, interpret meaning more accurately, and communicate more effectively. Thank you very much for your attention.